What's up? What's up? Oh, this new live looks fancy. Okay. What's up, Reggie? What's up, wifey? Everybody pulling in. Can y'all hear me good? Do I need to turn my headphones up? Oh, we got Crystal in here. It's really famous now. We got Crystal here. It's really famous. Mari. It is what a week. Laura. There we go. Man, thank my first badge. Thank you. It came from my brother. Oh, the family. Let's see. Has he popped in yet? I know. Where is your brick, Crystal? Theo, what's good? Hey!
Hold on.
What's up, fam? Hold up. Am I freezing up or is it Darnell, y'all? Let me see. It might have been me. Okay. I think we.
All right. Can you hear me? Okay.
There we. Okay. All right. Yeah. I got you, brother.
Listen,
What's up?
It's Monday.
Up?
It's Monday. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It is. We had it all. We had to do like a PD, and so I basically been listening to. Well, I wouldn't say it's like. It feels like it's all about how you're not as good a teacher, and here are the things that you
Absolutely.
need to do.
I've been
what
there.
I mean?
My first job ever was that of a teacher.
Yeah.
I loved everything about it. It was the most rewarding job I ever had. Most underpaying, longest hours.
Word? Because you're doing like $30 a week or something, wasn't it?
But it was amazing.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, for the folks that are tuning in, this is none other than Darnell L. Moore. You got to say the L, you know what I'm saying? Because he is doing amazing things. He is the VP of Inclusion for Content and Marketing at Netflix, former head of strategy and programs at Breakthrough Us. Also, the author of a 2019 New York Times Notable Book of the Year and Lambda Literary Award-winning memoir, No Ashes in the Fire. We're going to talk about this to Zizay, right? He holds double master's degrees in clinical counseling and theological studies. Moore has long been pivotal in advocating for and celebrating the Black LGBTQI plus communities and allies, and also the creator of the Being Seen podcast. And he has wrote for numerous, and I mean numerous, because I tried to look through all of them, and he's been writing for almost 2 decades. So
You're making me sweat. I'm over
like,
here.
Yo. Nah, you had me sweating. I was like, wow. And there's a
Working on it
upcoming
slowly.
book, Unbecoming. Okay. So we already kind of talked about how you're doing, but this, I think, is one of the most important questions I'm going to ask. The people want to know, what is your skincare routine? What can you tell us about it? What can you legally let go? Let us know what is available and what can we do to fix ourselves.
I needed this on a Monday. My skincare regime is this: curate my energy to keep only peace and positivity around me. I don't let negativity or much of anything that stresses me into my personal space. I mean, that's sort of like metaphysical, right? But I do think that has a lot to do with the way that we show up in the world, not just in our bodies, but also in our spirits. And what's funny? I look back at some of my pictures when I was like in my early 20s, my mid 20s, when I had the darkest periods of my life. And I'll just look entirely different. I looked older.
Mm-hmm.
I looked older because I was carrying so much weight. So first part is, wash your face, get you some good product, but also curate your energy. And keep positivity in your life on purpose. And let me be clear, like every day is not like honky dory. It's not like we're walking around with sort of perfect lives every day. But any part that I can play in making sure that I eliminate all the negativity around me, the better, and that I don't add to negativity in other people's lives. And then I just get mad.
Hey, that's real too. That's real too.
Yeah,
that's what it is. Look, I was listening to your Being Seen podcast with Kiese, and like he ends it trying to get some information on your beard. And he was like, "Mine mad nappy. I need to put some oil."
No, when I'm real though, I will say this. I mean, we joke. Kiese and I joke all the time, but I am a big advocate, particularly of brothers, of men identified folk who have been taught to believe that doing stuff like washing our faces, taking care of ourselves, washing your damn underarms, getting your nails clean, making sure there's no dirt in your nails, like taking care of our temples, our bodies, is like a feminine project, quote unquote. And so many see that as like something that we can't do. But look, I wash and condition my beard every damn day. I get up. It's a practice for me. I want to smell good. I want to be and not for anybody else, but for me. So I love that. For real, it is something that we can, I like this. I feel like we need to be sharing our skincare products, our skincare regimens with one another. Are we there?
Yeah. I was gonna say, am I breaking up? If I'm breaking up, somebody let me know in the chat so I can fix it. Cause I got that Mississippi Wi-Fi. I ain't dealing with that LA Wi-Fi like you got, and things get a little hairy. You know what I'm saying?
It's all good.
Yeah.
We'll roll with it.
Well, first of all, I don't know if I did this. Thank you, because you are hella busy. Thank you for coming on and for giving us those gems, because we really, I think that's a really big thing. My wife took me for my first pedicure, and I've been begging to go back ever since. I think I had about 2 or 3. It is, I mean, it's wonderful, and ever since I've been trying to exfoliate too. You know what I'm saying? So, I'm doing a little bit better,
And
I'm
let me
trying to
before we
do
get
my
too
thing.
far into the conversation, thank you for having me on. Thank you for all the work that you do every day to make space for writers like me, for all of us. You're out here, along with so many other folk, like the folk on this chat. I just really appreciate your work and uplifting us and our words.
Yes, I'm gonna replay that all day tomorrow for my students so that they can know that somebody as big as you appreciate what I'm doing. Thank you. All right, so let's get into it. I've kind of chopped it up into like 3 different parts because you kind of have like a robust, I guess, catalog of achievements and creativity. So we'll get into the book first. So there's a part in chapter 3 when you're discussing your push to get into AT, and AT is like the advanced classes, what we call down here like the honors program. You say that it wasn't because you were actually better or more intelligent than your peers, and that all kids deserve to be in the same position and the possession of books that didn't have y'all parents' names in them. Can you talk a little bit about that experience, like of taking ownership of like your academic
you
direction?
would bring that up, Mr. Educator, Mr. Teacher. I think the first thing I was also trying to do in that particular share, that vignette, was to lift up the fact that, and I think there's a trap in memoir, particularly for memoirs written by Black folk who come up in working class, economically distressed conditions, right? Where the one who made it out, quote unquote, or the one who is sort of successful, quote unquote, is upheld as somehow different and apart from everybody else. And I wanted to write myself into the narrative as someone who was no different than anyone else who didn't get an opportunity, for whatever reason, to be pushed into academically talented classes. Now, that's a sort of a smaller way to get at the bigger problem I was trying to address, and that is to say, a black boy comes out of Camden, get their name on a memoir, and all of a sudden we want to celebrate this black boy for what seems like meritocratic achievement, right? Darnell, let's celebrate you because you're that nigga that made it out.
Yeah.
And part of what I was trying to do in the book was to say, no. Like the fact that all of us, all of my peers in school deserved and needed access to the very types of educational support I get, that I had but didn't get access to, is the point, the problem that I want to point to. Not my what might be understood as individual success or individual desire, everyone in
Mm-hmm.
Camden in 8th grade at the time should have had access to the best literatures, right? The best technologies, the classes with less than 25 people plus in them, and not just me. So that's really what I was trying to get at in that part. Um, I was a hungry young person, but so
Yeah.
were so many others. So were so many others who, and I don't see
Mm-hmm.
myself as any better than, any different than them. I critique the structures that made our inability to get the access to those things possible. That's what I'm critiquing, not necessarily the people. But yeah, I was a hungry little feisty 13, 14-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, I can dig it. So a follow-up question to that would be like, what type of programming do you think we can do to kind of build that feistiness into students who may not
Yeah,
necessarily have that naturally? And I ask that because I believe in like a 2018, 2019 write-up that I read, you said sometimes what we imagine to be our good is not always our best, is not always great, and sometimes that good can be commodified. And so how do we create programming that gets at that and builds that feistiness naturally without allowing like outside structures to
yeah.
commodify
A
it?
big part of it for me was community. Um, so I think there are ways we can, when we're thinking about what do we need to make sure that our young people in particular and our communities have access to the type of shit that they need, resources, support. We think programmatic interventions, nonprofit structures, in-school
Mm-hmm.
programs. But my liberation and freedom and life-saving and resources and grace came from everyday, ordinary people in my hood who saw in me what they thought was potential. As one example, my sixth to eighth grade music teacher, Miss Dunham, um, would take me home often with permission from my mom and keep me at her house on the weekends. And look, she put me in
Yeah.
Glee Club. When I would go home with her, she would have me sitting at the piano and she
Yeah.
would play piano and make me sing with her. And while I never really articulated all that
Yeah.
was happening in my life at the time as a young person, I think she saw the bigness that was in my life. And she probably also saw the weights that I carried
Mm-hmm.
from all that was happening within the inside of my home. Um, and she covered me and she covered me. So yeah, we
Yeah.
can, and I also had access to programming when I was in school. When I was in sixth to eighth grade, at that time in the early '90s, school districts were still pouring money into the type of liberatory programs that, where
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those budgets are cut now. I went to like engineering programs on college campuses in the summertime, beginning in 6th grade. I was already getting college
Yeah.
credits, right, pretty early on, and getting access to those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you understand, in sort of the world that we live in now, a lot of districts are minimizing those budget lines so that young people don't get access to the arts and are not getting access to a lot of these things. But beyond that, I just had a loving community of people who saw me when I did not see myself. And any of us can be that link to a young person every day without the intervention of the state, without money, like big coffers of money that says, we can develop a quote unquote program. Like, show up. How do you show up and make yourself available, right, to somebody who needs that type of possibility
Yeah.
model, as Laverne Cox would say, in our life?
Yeah. Man, you just I gotta go to a meeting tomorrow because
Mm,
for some reason I was like tapped to kind of come up with some things to build morale for students heading into testing season. And I don't know why, considering like some of the stuff I've been reading lately, I didn't think about like pulling in like literally from the community because our school is smack dab in the middle of the community. To where that might work a little bit better than us trying because the incentive things it's not working like you do something good you get a bag of hot chips.
exactly.
First of all, they came with the hot chips. They already had them. My babies is selling them to
They, you
each
know
other.
what,
You know what I'm saying? Like
young people
it's
want
already there.
to know that there are people in the world that see them, that believe in them, right? That can show up for them.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
for all of the
yeah.
for
Oh
all
yeah,
of the access that I had coming up, that was great. Those programs, Prime, and all of the stuff I got to do on college campuses was great. But the moment when someone that I may have looked up to or not stood in front of me and said, you can and you will, when all else around me, from what I saw on television, from what I was seeing in the communities, from what I was hearing in the church, was telling me that I can't and I won't. You know, I was also a
Mm-hmm.
young person coming up queer, coming up into myself as a gay person, right? So it meant something for me for for a young person who spent an inordinate and unnecessary amount of my life learning to hate myself, desiring not to be
Yeah.
here, to have adults stand in front of me and say things like, you're a great writer. Your voice, you know, I would sing in Glee Club, is like powerful. You need to use your voice beyond even the gifts. Like, you
Yeah.
deserve
Yeah.
to be here. And let me show you how I know. Like, I'm going to make like sure that I can reflect that, you know, by showing up in your life for you. Those are the things that young
Yeah.
people need. And I mean, ask any of us on this call, like, when's the last time we told a young person that they deserve to be here, that they deserve to be alive, that they deserve and have every right to take up space in this world as a Black, especially Black young people, especially Black young people without access to resources or wealth. Like, I don't need to give you a gift. The gift is me telling a young person that you have every right to be here, to be alive, to be protected, right? To have your gifts manifested.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, thank you for your work
Yeah.
and all the
Yeah.
work of those that are teachers on this call.
Yeah. That is facts. That is facts right there, brother. Okay, so speaking to the necessity of young kids, and particularly Black and brown kids, knowing how important it is that they are here. I saw a meme that said Black males are experiencing the highest rate of increase in suicide attempts. And so I did what I always do when I see a meme like that. I sought out some scholarly peer reviewed write ups on it, and one article I found from 2021 said the new data showed a nearly 80% increase in Black male adolescents attempting suicide since 1991.
Mm,
It also stated that young Black males are thought of as stronger and older, which I think we could probably
yep,
attribute to the way that they see Black females as
yep.
well,
Black young people,
uh,
period.
or film students as well. Um, yeah, period. But that they don't have safe spaces to talk
Mm,
about vulnerability, which could be drastically dangerous because they face a perfect storm of hardships. Of course, we know, like I said, all Black kids kind of face that. And as someone who has written about this particular storm, can you speak to that and what types of things that you think
mm,
we could possibly do to curb it? Because on page 141, you wrote about your wanting out until it was an actual option that you had to contend with, that the quick rush towards death for you wasn't a morbid want for immortality. It was a quiet rebuke of the very real
mm,
circumstances that hindered your survival, right? And that ending with this, that those who feel undesirable and worthy of death in a state that gives you no reason to believe you have a right to live, tend to move quickly to accommodate those desires. Can you speak to
wow. First
that
of all,
reference
like,
in
I'm
your
just
line?
sitting here, like, I'm
That
trying to
was
think, like, I wrote
powerful.
those words.
Yeah,
Well, a
it
few
was
things
you,
I'll
brother.
say
You
there.
killed it.
There's a lot of scholarly work
Mm,
that has been done that talks about accelerated childhoods, and what a lot of scholars say,
mm-hmm.
and what we know to be true as Black folk, um, is that young Black people are not seen as young Black people, as children. They're often, you know, by the time you're 13 or 12, whether you're a boy, a girl, a non-binary person, you know, they're like, you know, you're looked at as an adult. You're not given the benefit or the grace
Mm-hmm.
or the blessing of having and being afforded a childhood. I mean, look, how many names can we count on of people, of young people that have been killed, say, on the streets, either by police or some other instrument of the state, who said something like, "Oh, we thought that they were, you know, they're 13 or 12." I mean, we can list the names, right? But this person is, we thought they were an adult, but they're an actual young person. Or how many of us grew up in homes where it was like, be a
Mm-hmm.
man and you're only 12 years old, still learning how to ride a bike or a big wheel. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
telling me to learn how to be a man, and
Mm-hmm.
I've not even learned how to pee straight. I've not even learned how to sort of tie my sneaker. I don't even know how to clean my ass right. But you're asking me to be a man, right? So
Yeah.
think about the pressure that puts on young Black folk when we sometimes within our domestic spaces like our homes, or within a sort of other domestic space that is the streets, demand that young people, girls, boys, non-binary folk, show up something other than children that they are. Second thing I'll say, I was walking down the streets of Newark one day where I live, so like a second home, and I watched a little white girl with her mom who had to be maybe, I guess, 10 or 11, like hopping down the street just joyfully. And I was just like, wait a minute. It just struck me how much possession of life that young person was in ways that young Black kids are never sort of allowed or afforded. And I was just like, she's just hopping along. And you know what? She gets to be happy. She gets to be happy, maybe not in fear of her life, as she's walking down the streets of Newark in ways that another young Black or Latinx person would have to be, right, on those street corners. So it isn't just the ways we're domesticated to believe that young Black kids are not kids, but then the world tells you that shit. The world tells you that, right? But then on top of that, you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, we're not even talking about the particularities of people's young people's like life worlds. I mean, some of us will sooner call a preacher to pray for our young people before we get them a counselor. And let me be clear, I'm not demonizing Black people here. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm not at all, because I come from a Black family. We didn't have access to therapists, right? And they cared. I'm not trying to paint Black people as a monolith. I'm just trying to have a real conversation with us, right? That so many of our young people need ears. They need someone. They need ears and hearts. They need people who can sit down and make space for the big complexities that are their lives. They feel, they hurt, they have questions. Sometimes they don't believe what we believe. They push back. They're in a different generation. They have different contexts, particularly as boys who are socialized to be men, who are socialized not to feel, who are socialized not to share, who are socialized not to be transparent. Don't cry. Don't act like you give a shit about anything but your power and what's between your legs. Don't give any vulnerability, because if you give vulnerability, you're going to get called a punk, or some person in the streets who've been taught through patriarchy to believe that any boy that show up that's not tough ain't the type of person they don't want to date. I mean, the shit it's a cycle. You know what I'm trying to say? It makes sense to me why we would have this space where you have people who are socialized to be non-feeling things rather than human beings to want to take their lives. So I don't get why we will sit here and be so surprised when so many of us have been, and I'm including myself in this, who've been part of the problem. Look, I carried the weight of depression and suicidal ideation and suicide attempts in loneliness, because I did not feel comfortable saying to anyone, listen, I'm hurting. Ain't no amount of good clothes I put on can cover that shit up. I would walk down the streets with the sun blazing, feeling like there was a cloud over my head. And I was somebody that had access to resources. Now imagine if that's a young person. Imagine if that's somebody in our family who don't even have access to those resources, who's living through hurt, who can't tell you that they're in pain, who can't even probably point to what the pain is coming from. So I don't know. So all that to say, sorry for the preaching moment, but I just take this shit so seriously, right? All that to say, we need to have real conversations. I don't need to have that shit on IG, like in our homes, with our folk, pick up a phone, email, write a letter, talk to your folk, ask them, how is your heart? What's your spirit giving? What is it that you need? What is it that you're feeling? I tell young folk all the time, particularly young boys, when's the last time you cried? I'm gonna ask the adults, the men, the male identified. When is the last time you cried? And then I say, when is the last time you cried in front of somebody else? And when you were in front of those folks, when was the last time you accepted a hug? You let somebody hold you. You held somebody else. You cried in the arms of somebody else. If we can't answer yes to those things, right? One, because we've been socialized not to do it, then that's going to point to the center of our malaise. And even I'm like, look, we can know all the feminist theory. We can read all the bell hooks. We can know all the Kimberly Crenshaw intersectionality. We can be all up on the gram with all the language. And still, some of us who write about these things, who preach about these things, you see the rates of men who preach in the pulpit, who are talking to other people about how they can be helped, who still can't help themselves, because we get trapped into the belief that in order to be a real man, we got to be everything other than feeling human, bleeding beings. And that is at the base of why some of us don't survive. And we need to come against that, right? So I'll just stop there. I stop there and say that we can make this shit real by making sure that we are checking and not only checking on, but checking literally our folk and making sure that they have the spaces as Black people, particularly, to show up what others will try to say we aren't, and that's human. Period.
Hey, preach, brother. Speak, brother. You said a word there. Let me see. There was something you said that really ties into something else that I want to talk about. Where is it? I got 20 questions here, so gotta scroll through here. So in talking about the way that we are building up, particularly boys, right, or men who have, or people who have been identified as men. There was a write-up you did on onbeing.org titled "Self-Reflection and Social Evolution." I believe it was an interview. You said that you didn't want to become a better man, because you all know what I've been told manhood is not anything I'm trying to aspire to. I want to become a better human person. It made me think about what you wrote on page 160 about how all boys are taught that the world is theirs. But Black boys learn early on that the world they are required to rule is the home. Because outside the home, the street Black boys navigate are controlled by the state and the wealthy, and Black boys' freedoms are restricted and policed. How do we break out of these ideas of manhood and into this freedom of becoming a better human person?
First of all, I knew you was going to show up having done all the work.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got to a point in my own walk where it was clear to me that I worked so hard to try to fit into the mold of what society or our communities understand to be sort of like proper or perfect or model manhood. And as I was trying to fit myself into that little ass box, it was clear to me that that's where my discomfort was coming from. I was trying to be what would make a version of what makes everybody else comfortable. Be like, even though I was a person who grew up really loving the art and loving to move my body and loving to dance and just like be with the girls and like not do the sports, I was purposefully moving myself into becoming a version of myself that was not true to who I was. And that's that, what's interesting. And I said that, I was like, yo, that is the definition of jail. That's the definition of being imprisoned. To being in a version of yourself that is not home. So it was clear to me that the way that I found freedom was not by becoming a quote unquote man or becoming a version of what others would think, right, ought to be celebrated. I was trying to become myself, and I gave the middle finger really to any idea of me, of a version of me that others said I ought to be if I were to receive their grace, their love, or their attention. Like, I want to, like, freedom for me means to eschew and to let go of whatever ideas other people tell us we ought to ascribe to in order to be celebrated or accepted into a community. So my version is like, now I tell people, don't try to become the sort of version of the man. Don't become. Give the middle finger to that and be the person, the human person, the big-hearted, complex person that you are beyond the sort of defining norms or ideas that other people say we ought to be. So how do we do that then? It means that if we want people to be the best authentic version of themselves, it means that we should not try so hard to police the boundaries of their being. That we should not be on the other end saying, why your little cousin over there? See that? Why he playing around with like the doll? You know what I mean? Or why your cousin over there? Why is she so good and so butch? Or you know, when I date, like, you know, if my man is coming in the house with tears in his eyes and showing any type of feeling, that nigga, he weak. I want a hard man. Or if I'm even a gay dude and I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm not dating any femme dudes. I don't want any bottoms, no weak ass bottoms, because, you know, this understanding that to be a top, which is to be the giver, is to somehow be better than the receiver, which is really some femme antagonistic, sexist shit that's not even homophobic, but it's all about us being taught as men that to have power is to be dominant, is to be in control. So it isn't just on a person.
Yeah.
It isn't just on a person, right? To have to, who sees himself in a world, and that's me and you, that's everybody, to live in a world where they are free to be who they are. It's all of our job as a community to lift up the restrictions and to not build the cages that keep so many of our people locked up. That's the work for us to do. That's it. Don't build no cage. Don't put anybody in your cage.
Yeah.
A cage, really, that is all about the comfort of those who are existing outside of it, and never about the person who's been held by it, captured by it.
Yep. I read somewhere you were talking about identities, and you were talking about how sometimes you try to, you know, burst out of that because you know that so many times when you make this attempt to label something, that's to make the person who's doing the labeling comfortable. You know what I mean? You know, and I was like, wow, you know, to speak of cages, I was, when I'm reading your memoir, and if anybody that just came in, we're talking about No Ashes in the Fire by Darnell Moore and everything else that this amazing human being has done. But I had this autofiction short story about this, and this may be a part of why I was capped for this program, but about this intimate scene that I had with a student. He's grown now and is doing quite well for himself, right? But in this story, the student came in, right, and it's his senior year, and he's ready to graduate. Now, you know, he wasn't quite where he needed to be academically, right? And he wants like the chords and, you know, the stole. And so he's doing, he did the community service one, and he wanted to do the blood drive one, right? So he came in. I used to open up my planning period for students to come in, because I always felt like if students don't want to be in the class, right, and they would rather like go somewhere else, if there's a space on the campus where they can go, they'll stay on campus. You know what I mean? And so they would always kind of come in and hang with me during my planning period. We just listen to music, we work on their poetry and essays that they were thinking about writing. So he came in this day, and he didn't want to talk, right? He was quiet, right? So I sent everybody else out like on a mission, like to go see, give me some paper for a data wall. And I'm like, yo, what's up? You know what I'm saying? And he was like, I went to go get the blood stole, and I couldn't get it. You know, and I was like, why you couldn't get it? He was like, well, they asked me a series of questions. I was like, you answered them, right? You know, and he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, so what's the problem? Do I need to go down there and talk to him? And he was like, one of the questions was, have I had sex with someone of the same sex within, I think, the last 3 months, right? And at this point, I am unawares, right, that, you know, he's a homosexual male. And he said, and I answered the question. I was like, okay, so what's the problem? He was like, I told the truth, you know? And in that story, I then had to do the knowledge of understanding. I didn't even know that you couldn't give blood in the state of Mississippi with these ramifications, right? And while I'm reading your story, you said in chapter 4, the twin forces of shame and stigma penetrates the lives and psyches of Black, queer, and trans people. The state's refusal to name same-sex desire as acceptable and separate from the AIDS epidemic was piercing. And these two sentences affected the hell out of that student. You know, he had been basically shamed into performing heteronormative behavior, right? Which is why I had, you know, that's not the only reason, right? But he's constantly saying he's straight. And then also now he can't get this cord, right? Which as a senior, that means everything. And then they explain to him that it's tied to sexually transmitted diseases. Can you kind of speak to what you're getting at in those sentences and how that affects Black, queer, and
I'll
trans
just say
people?
quickly that if the interventions that the ones that were tried when I was coming of age to curb the HIV epidemic were not successful, is because, and I write this too, they saw us as subjects to report on and not human persons.
Yep, that's in. Yep,
Every
that's
time
in
I
the
would
book.
go
Yep.
to the doctor's office, and I would go to the doctor's office a lot, there was no humanizing of my experience as a Black young person with questions, trying to figure out, like any other young person was, like, you know, my having sex life, my intimacy. You know, the question of had you had sex with another person was never really about an engagement on the intimacy that I was experiencing. It was never an engagement about my sense of contentment. It was a box to check off in order to determine the type of
Yeah.
intervention that I were to get. Now, if that is the way, then that the sort of not the medical industrial complex and, you know, some of the nonprofits had been set up to engage young Black people coming up in spaces like I came up, how is that going to shape your sense of self? But to stick to make you feel stigmatized, or shameful. Like, I wanted somebody to sit me down and say, wait, how's your heart? The person you had sex with, like,
Yeah.
what do you feel about them? What is it that you loved about that experience? Where
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
you? What type of questions do you
Yeah.
have? Right? Like, did you ever? And you know, coming up as a young gay person in health classes that are only organized around like straight shit, right? Like, I never had conversations about sex with anybody. Like, you know, I had to like figure all that shit out on my own or with friends. Like, there was no one, no doctors, no counselors, no adults around, other than the folk who would adopt me into sort of like a queer familial life, who was ready to teach me. Or I went to a
Yeah.
college that not only were they not talking about gay sex, it was a Roman Catholic school. They weren't talking about sex in general. So how is anyone supposed to come into a healthy sense
Yeah.
of who they are in their bodies? The last thing I'll
Yeah.
say, if you've been taught all of your life to believe that the very essence of who you are is one, either hell-bound because you're sinning, unworthy because you're immoral, not worthy of love or life because it goes against what we understand to be sort of the codes of human life. How might that shape how you engage not only with others intimately, but yourself? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I did all the
Yeah.
things. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I said, like, a lot of that wasn't just because I love sex, although sex is fine. Sex is good. We should celebrate sex. All types of sex, right? Like, as long as it's consensual.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
understand? But like, when you don't get access to
Word.
spaces as young people to talk about those things, you make all types of choices. And the choices that I made, you know, some of it was because I just didn't have anybody. You know, I was searching, I was filling holes, like spiritual holes in my life. I was doing all types of stuff to get affirmation, to get attention, and yet I had nobody really to turn to. So for young people, yes, there's a conversation to be had about. I like to talk to the adults. You know, like to us, that's on
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
IG live. What's our role in shoring up
Yeah.
the experiences of young people coming behind us? How do we make ourselves available to them? How do we make ourselves curious enough
Yeah.
to answer their questions? And I'll end by saying that's why I don't use, you know, I don't say like coming out. You know this. Like, I say, I've been
Yeah.
using like inviting in for like years, only because I say to folk, when we put a demand on young people or all people to name themselves, one, for who's that naming for? Most of the time, it's not really for the person who is queer or trans or non-binary identified. It's for the sake of a larger society that believes that anyone that's not straight or not cisgender needs to sort of like conform or name their identities for a public. That's about making society public, never about the person. All that to say, if it is a
Yeah.
gift to be present in the lives of young queer and trans folk, it's a gift when young people welcome us into their lives, not a burden, not a burden at
Yeah.
all. So I just would say to
Yeah.
folk, yeah, I mean, we may not be able to switch off and on all of the interventions, but you damn sure can switch on and off your love right now. If you got young people in your life, how are you showing up for
Yeah.
them?
Yeah. And the first thing, and I remember I was like, I think either I questioned him or something like that, and his response was, "I'm not sure." And then it turned like how you said you want to ask the adults, right? I thought to
Mm.
myself, I said, I'm making this about
Mm-hmm.
me. You know what I mean? I was like, he's inviting me in
Mm-hmm.
because I knew he hadn't told anyone else. And I was like, I'm making this about me. So then I was like, you all right? You know what I'm saying? Like, you good? He was like,
And he let
I
you
mean,
in
yeah,
though,
I'm gonna
but he
be all
let you
right,
in because
and
he trusts
then,
you.
hmm
And that's what I say about like inviting in.
yeah,
Like I always say,
yeah,
if somebody comes to your house and knock on the door, you typically don't let people in that don't mean you no good. You probably look in the peephole and you like, if you're a little shady and shysty, I'm
hmm
not letting you in. I'm not inviting you into my house. So when queer and trans folk
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah,
non-binary folk when they see you and let you in, it's only because they trust that you have enough love, enough grace, enough curiosity to be welcomed and to
yeah,
know when somebody's being hospitable enough to let you into the intimate spaces of their lives. That is just not on a person who is queer or trans to do the work of carrying the load of the relationship. Like so many of us we wait around for somebody
yeah,
to just, invite us in. Nah, like show up with love. We did that for straight
yeah,
people all our lives.
yeah.
Who you like? Who that little light skinned girl you walking down the street with? Who that little
hmm
dark skinned? Like that's what we do. That's the way we
yeah,
set young people up who are straight. And we've never given the benefit of
yeah,
that same type of
yeah,
humanizing grace, right, to young queer and trans people.
yeah. Man, you speaking the word, brother. You speaking the word here. Let me see. Okay, let's go this way. So in your
Oh
Forbes
gosh.
interview, I saw you talking about, a belief in boundless creativity. Can you speak to that in the ways you seem to be at the intersection of so many things: art, activism, fashion, education, spirituality, podcasts, and now Netflix? What is that like in terms of you being at the center of it, managing it, and filling it with a sort of boundless Black abundance? Because, like, I'm thinking about, I mean, like, being seen is like
Mm.
a sonic journey. You have people coming in and out. There's this music that is like, and it kind of changes like based on who's there. But it's like, I don't know. It's working in with the topic and with the people. And when I first heard it, I was like, damn, I need to straighten up our podcast. We gotta get some of these special effects that Darnell got going on. But what is it like existing at the intersection of all those
You
things
know
at
what?
once,
I'll just say
simultaneously?
this.
Like,
We grow up in a world that tells us, well, one, we grow up never really being nurtured into what our gifts are. And by gifts, I mean the things, our passions, the things that keep us up at night or wake us up early in the morning, right? We're socialized to be good at a thing that we can then go out and sort of be laborers
mhm,
for. That's a capitalist model, right? Like, people are not asking you what it is that you care about, what it is that you love. They're asking you what it is that you do because they want to know how you make money. Those are two different things, right? So I
mhm,
think for
yeah,
me,
yeah,
I'm an Aquarius, and I honestly believe that whatever the things are that we are passionate about, we should chase them down. And when you know what you're passionate about, or when you know what it is that the universe has called you to do, or what you're supposed to be doing in the world, in whatever form, and you go after that, you chase all that other stuff that the world tells us that we need, fame, money, attention, that
mhm,
shit comes as a consequence of us being in the world doing the work that we know we are called and supposed to do, right? And what I also believe to be true, the
yeah,
world also tells us that, it divides up sort of the spaces into boxes. They're supposed to be sort of, if there's going to be a Black gay writer, goddamn it, you better all fight over that one microphone because only one of y'all can be in that space. You can't be both a
mhm,
writer
yeah,
and somebody that wants to be on screen. You better be a bookstagrammer. Don't go out there and also try to be an author. Like that's what the world tells us. So we're taught to
yeah,
believe
yep,
that we got
yep,
to be
yep,
crabs in a barrel. And then here's what I say: crabs only fight because the barrel exists. But guess what? The crabs ain't create the damn barrel. There are industries that create the barrel.
mhm,
when we as the crabs in this
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
analogy understand that that barrel is limiting, that whatever the universe or whatever your spirit is telling you to do in a moment, that you can be unfettered and go at it and do it with excellence. That's the way I live my life. So I'm like, okay, you know what I'm saying? Like there are a
Yeah.
variety of things. Yeah, I love to write. I love to create. I'm an artist, right? So what are the various ways that I can do that? And to
Yeah.
be unapologetic about our ability, and don't let anybody tell you anything different. Well, you're a writer. What you think you need to be an editor for?
Yeah.
Are you an editor? What you think you need to get a book for? Or you're out here. Don't you got that book is enough? You don't need no pot. No. That is like a type. We don't. No. There is enough space and enough work to be done by all of us. By all of us. And I
Yeah.
just don't allow I don't allow
Yeah.
anyone, even and whenever I feel like I'm limiting myself, or whenever I feel like I'm leaning into the lie that somebody else told me, I sit down and have a good conversation with myself. The things that I'm most proud of are not things that show up on a like on a dossier or a bio. There's things that I've done that
Mm-hmm.
if I had believed that I could not do, there would not be institutions or works that have been sort of put in the world, that I've been part of collectively building, if I had believed somebody else's lie. So I just believe that we can be boundless in our creativity. And I think that we should go at
Yeah.
it hard,
And you
especially when the focus of
you are
that is
killing it.
us. It's our love, and we do it because of the love
Yeah.
for our folk. And I often say, like, that love can take different permutations. Maybe this month you might want to do a podcast, the next month you want to write, but as long as you're giving it, give it. And don't let nobody tell you anything different.
Word, man. Word. I'm telling you. I'm taking notes too. If you see me doing that, that's what I'm doing. I'm taking notes. I got accelerated childhoods in here and all kind of other stuff. I'm telling you. All right, let's see. There's something that ties into the boundless creativity one. Oh goodness. I know my wife's gonna whoop me in a second if I
Oh,
don't find it
no.
fast.
We out here. You know, listen, we're good. We're very good.
We good?
Let the
Okay. All
spirit
right.
lead you.
Okay. All right. So this is something that we talked about a little bit earlier, but I think it's something that is okay to circle back on. But bodies, fully developed bodies, white bodies, and your peers' bodies all seem to play a role in your understanding of your personal body and your understanding of the possibilities of love. What is it about the human body that intrigues you in terms of love, fashion, motion, and death? And how do you think these things were affected by your assertion on page 99? The elementary schools and middle schools that you attended talked only about white love and heterosexual desire.
Now that is did y'all hear this question you just asked me? Ooh. Okay, so let me try to answer that in a couple parts. One, I think my fascination with the body, and by the body, I know that there's a way that during these times we talk about the Black body, and I want to push back against that a bit. We are Black human people with bodies, some of us, right? Like, all right. So that said, I am particularly interested in talking about the body, or the way that we are embodied, or our lust, or our skin, or whatever, partly because of how so much of the ways I was taught in an anti-Black educational system had me thinking for the longest time. And not just an anti-Black educational system, but an anti-queer system too, right? That had me believing that my intimacies, the way I loved, the way I felt inside, the shit that I could not explain, but I felt it, right? The blood running through my veins when I was in 6th to 8th grade, looking at my biology teacher. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I don't know what this is. This is another dude I'm looking at, but I'm feeling something in my body that I can't explain, or the ways that I had to teach myself to love my dark skin and my big lips and my wide nose, because so much of the world was telling me that those very things were to be derided, are not loved, or like so much of the way that we relate, the ways that we give our love and care is based off of a sort of economy of body shape. You know what I mean? Like, If you're queer, it's
Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
go to
Yeah.
dating sites and it's like no fats, no fat. Like so much of all of the things that we think are disconnected from our embodiment
Mm-hmm.
and who we are as Black folk is grafted in the body. So that's part of one of the reasons why. And also, I grew up as a church boy in some parts of my life too, and so much of that work was about so much of the sort of theological work had me in the church wanting to get rid of the body for the sake of some spiritual quest that I was supposed to aspire to. Like all
Yeah.
this getting ready for heaven, but
Yeah.
never really taught to love the very gift, the God created gift, the body, the human person that was present here on earth. And I would always be like, why you got me up here doing all of this to get into heaven on a lie? Getting on in heaven on some lie that I'm straight, or some lie that I'm supposed to perform some type of morality. When in fact, the very
Mm-hmm.
ways I'm experiencing myself here on this earth, the very sensations I'm experiencing in this body, the very truths that this body is telling me, the truth of my Blackness, the truth of my queerness, the truth of all of the various things that I am, right, are present right here. And I believe in that particular point that the way that I was, the way that I was supposed to sort of be a gift to myself was give attention to the very gift that God has given me, and that's this body right here. And so, I mean, that's sort of what I think. I mean, that's
Yeah.
partly
Yeah.
why I've been, I guess, so invested in that. I would always say, like James Cone sort of uttered, like there are many ways we preach people into heaven, like into these understandings that we're supposed to sort of separate people from the very lived experiences that they are experiencing, when in fact we're called to like examine where we are now and our here and now. So that's it. And
Yeah.
and queer people, let me just give
Yeah.
a shout out to queer and trans folk,
Hey.
right? Like when so much of our understanding by everybody else is totally connected to sex, we only thought about like we're thought about as human persons whose whole being is organized around who we have sex with. You know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
virtue of that,
Yeah. Yeah.
you already invited us into sort of embodiment without even, setting the sort of equitable stakes for it. So,
Yeah. Preach, preach, preach. I was looking around. I was like, I just had, because Dante had me reading
of course,
Cone.
Dante
He
had you
was like,
reading
that's
Cone.
like one of the like, he was like one of like the foundation, like the blast off points, to kind of get into some of that theological theory. Let's see here. Come to me, question.
I
Ah,
love that.
no.
I used to, when I was a church boy, I used to have the Bible and I'd be like, Lord, I'm going to open up to the scripture that's going to speak to me
Yeah,
right in
I
this
used
moment.
to do the
And then
same
it'll be something in
thing.
like Numbers. And I'd be like, this ain't it.
Yeah,
This genealogy, this
this
ain't
ain't
helping
it.
me
This
right now.
ain't, listen, I used to do the same thing, man. I'd be like, the universe is gonna guide me to the scripture that I need to read, and then it'd be like about playing trumpets and cymbals, and I'd be
No,
like,
I would always end up on
I'm
like
not in band.
Leviticus or
I
Numbers,
can't.
and it's like a genealogy of a family. I'm like, what is this? I don't need to know about who Abraham's
Mm-hmm.
kids was. This ain't doing nothing for my situation. I'm trying to break up, Lord. I'm trying to break up. Jesus,
Word.
give me a word about this breakup.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So speaking of theory, we can go here. So during my recon session, I saw
Oh,
Robin
sure,
D.G.
yeah.
Kelly come up a lot in interviews. What can you say about his work and how he has influenced your perspective? Specifically, this quote here about my freedom dream is that we exist in a world where particularly those Black folks who exist on the edges of the margins are imagined as also being part of the center of our visions for freedom. So maybe what I'm asking for is a call to action. What can you say like about that call to action? How Robin D.G. Kelly has influenced the way that you do your work and your
Yeah, first big
what's the
shout out
word,
to
perspective?
Robin D.G. Kelly, the GOAT. Um, and one of the reasons why I
Yeah.
love Freedom Dreams and the Black Radical Imagination, which is where that comes from, is because so much of what
Mm-hmm.
Robin Kelly is exploring is the uses of the arts and culture as engines for social transformation and social change. And often we think about what we may consider to be the extraordinary, exceptional work of like, um, the disruptions on the streets and you know, movements as only being organized around the protest and the policy work, but so much of all of that is fueled by art. It's fueled by cultural production, and
Yeah.
I just love that because it also allows me as an artist to know that I also have a stake and a place in this larger constellation of movement work. And that work doesn't have to look like policy change. It can look like the writing of a song or a painting or the writing of a book that is just as useful and fueling for the work as all of the rest. And it's necessary for that work. You think about like the Black Power moment as one example, so much of that was fueled by the iconography, the symbolism, all that was happening in the music with James Brown. I mean, like I'm Black and I'm proud, like all of that was also fueled, right, by cultural work. So that's one of the things that I would say is essential to what I've learned from Robin Kelly's work. But the other aspect of what I was saying there was that so much of our work and freedom dreaming has been organized around a heteronormative, cisgender, male identified, charismatic man type of leader idea archetype.
Mm-hmm.
And a part of what I was trying to say is that if we are all to get free as Black people, we need to go to the edges of the margin. Our freedom dreams need to begin there. It needs to be expanded there, because if those folk, whoever they might be, are not alive, present in our freedom dreams, then the future, the black liberatory future you're trying to build will not be liberatory for all. In fact, your freedom dream will be somebody else's nightmare. So that's part of what I would leave us with. I think the action is to challenge ourselves and ask ourselves the question: who's alive in your freedom dream? Who's present? Who are you fighting for?
Yeah.
Whose concerns matter to you? Whose names do you remember? Whose lived experiences are lifted up, right? Who are we thinking about and crying for? Who are our hearts going after? And then ask ourselves, who the fuck is missing? And then when you figure out who's missing, right? You do all that you need to do to get there, to get your hearts big and swelled enough so that they can be present. Because so many of us Black folk out here believing, and I say this shit all the time, BLM shirts and all this other stuff, fists raised, myself included. And I know that the real work is me asking, after all of that is done, who have I left out of my freedom dream? Because otherwise we won't have true liberation for all of us if we don't ask ourselves that question and take it up as an action to move towards.
Mm-hmm. And so in that article, you were saying that you have seen and heard also people say that that's like that to consider these people is to be distracted from the mission. And I'm wondering, this is just kind of coming. Where do you think that this idea that could be a distraction comes from? Is it rooted in, like, where would you say it's rooted? Is it completely like rooted in the Black Power movement, or in some of those guys that were in the Black Power movement trying to imitate?
We have a genealogy, like a long history of a Black movement, and we have come a long way in the politics that foreground those movements. I was on a call recently with some brothers that were doing organizing work in the 60s, and it was an intergenerational call. And I waited for them to say that one of the things, and not everybody this is not everybody's story, but I knew their story. And I wanted them to say, was waiting for them to say, part of our overinvestment was in the liberation of Black men only. They talked about the ways that sexism and patriarchy was pervasive in the movements, and that, the homophobia that was strikingly present was actually present, and even some of the ways they may have maintained that. So part of the belief, part of what I know to be true, is that we have always, even within our struggles for liberation, having to untether ourselves from the very technologies of power, the very artifacts, the very forms of domination that we say we are warned against. We doubly have to then do the work of ensuring that we don't replicate it. I'll end by saying, like, and this is a way that I get people to think about it. I say we are really good at naming whose feet are on our necks. We are not good at naming the necks that our feet are on. We are really good at naming the feet that are on our necks. We are not good at naming the necks that our feet are on. And once we figure out that our feet are on somebody's necks, if we are so gracious, it's even harder to take your feet off, right? Like I'm like, who wants to give up power?
Yeah.
But that's our work to do. That's our work to do. Once you figure out your feet's on somebody's neck, and for the people here in the audience, right? All of us got our feet up on somebody's neck. Once you figure that shit out, you got to take them feet off. That's our work. That's what the radical work looks like.
Yeah.
And that's just what I think. It's not a challenge. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for that's a gift to have that self-reflexive analysis. To have that analysis enough to do that work.
Yeah. Yeah. You and then you ended it, because I remember reading that too. You said if we do that work, then we can all walk around less encumbered. And I was just thinking that, like, I mean, what a metaphor. Like, we could all walk around less encumbered. Like, we ain't even able to walk around. We claiming that we're doing this work, and we're not even able to walk around because we haven't looked at the necks that we have our feet on. This is a fun thing I said I want to do. What is a question that you have always wished that you were asked
Oh, that's so
during
good.
interviews?
What is a question that I've always wished I had been asked during an interview? I've been asked a lot of questions too, but what is one that I wish I had been asked? Maybe one of the most. I've spent a good amount of time around elders and people who, some of whom have transitioned. And maybe one of the moments that remains with me as one of the most life-changing. And I can answer that. I
Mhm.
I had this big dream I lived in Newark for a good amount of time, and I was really active then, like working and then organizing and doing all types of shit. I was very active, and I would always run into Mary Baraka and Amina Baraka, his wife, and Cheryl Clark, who is a Black lesbian poet and scholar out of Rutgers. Look her up if y'all don't know Cheryl's work. Cheryl is an icon. Both be in sort of the same area at the same. We would be like in similar, like at the city hall at the same time. And I remember one day we were there for two different reasons. Me with Cheryl and Amiri was there, and they passed each other. And for those of you who don't know, Cheryl Clark wrote this profound and iconic essay called "The Failure to Transform," I believe, in the Black community, and it was a critique of patriarchy and queer antagonism in sort of like the Black arts movement and the period of like Black power. She was a poet who saw herself as part of the Black art sort of genealogy. Yes, Jason, she's from DC. And understood Amiri Baraka, Leroy Jones, as somebody that she heralded as like a father, right? But she read Amiri for filth, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. She read Amiri for filth in this essay. I've never seen a person read eviscerated like that in an essay before. But here's the thing. If she had done it, it's because she loved him so. You ain't gonna go hard on a person unless you love him. And she called out all of the folk that were up here with all the Black rap, all the Black love jazz, who could not love all the Blacks, who could not love the Black lesbians like she was, the Black butch lesbians like she would say, or anybody else. So to see them 20 years later, 30 years later, passing each other, I was like, I need to know what they're thinking about one another right now. So I had a point. I said with Amy Cox, Professor Amy Cox, who's at Yale, Dr. Cox. We set them down for an interview in Mary's house, and to get them to sort of address that impact, like this sort of crossing. The interview was called The Crossing, and it was so much love to see them show up with such deep respect for one another. She's still naming him somebody that totally inspired her. And also being able to articulate the way that she saw his politics grow. The day we sat down was actually the anniversary of Amiri Baraka's daughter's murder, who was a lesbian. By the way, his daughter was a lesbian. She was killed by her sister and her sister's paramour boyfriend. And a full circle moment where the same person that Cheryl critiqued years ago sat down talking about the need for us to really center and bring love towards Black, queer, and trans people. So it wasn't just a powerful moment because those two icons were able to sit down, but it was powerful because it reminded me that people grow in their politics, right? Like that if we, and I'm saying this in a moment where the culture, we're organizing the culture to just like, if a person don't got their shit together, if they fuck up, it's like you're canceled, you're good, you're done. But what if we didn't give somebody like Leroy Jones and Mary Baraka that space? How many people are we not giving space to? And I often say, and I'll end here, like in our quest for people what are we asking for? Are we asking for retribution? Are we asking for cancellation? Are we asking for transformation? Because if we answer the question, what it is that we really want, we might find that the mechanisms we're using to get the thing that we want are not useful. So I don't know. That moment for me just strikes me as one that was profoundly reflective of what Black radical love looks like. It looks like Cheryl being able to call him out, to name what was wrong, but to do so because she loved him enough to know that should he receive the graceful word she was given, he could arrive on the other side change, and to show up at that point in his life after him having learned something, but be it, by the way, from Black women in his life, right? So I just offer that as a really powerful lesson, and I will never forget it at all.
Amazing. I'm glad you answered, because I was going to literally come back at you with the question. Was my plan? That is amazing. I got chills just thinking about like seeing that. You know, even now, before I do these interviews, I run through the house and I'm like, I'm scared.
Before I do these interviews, I run through the house. I'm like, praying, I'm fasting, I'm doing all this stuff. Like, you know, I also want. It's a lot. It's a lot. You know, like
Go ahead.
I also just, you know, want to lift you up for just digging into whatever power you have within yourself, whatever curiosity you have to create a platform like this for us to show up. It's not easy. You know what I mean? And it takes a lot to do it. So I just want to acknowledge you and to celebrate you and to thank you for all that you are doing in spite of your own fears and anxieties. And you show love when you show up prepared and when you show up caring enough about a person's path to have done the research. And so many people these days, you know, they show up like, you know, it's not, and it's just like, I just appreciate the loving way you've shown up, not just for me, but for so many of us every day.
Yeah, I appreciate that more than you know. I doing this during my birthday week is like, I don't know, it's just the most wonderful like ritual, you know, like, so I think what's his name, is it Rhyme Fest, is Kanye's friend, was it Rhyme Fest or like there was this guy who used to rap with Kanye, right? And I think it was Rhyme Fest, but I was just starting Ablackmanreading, right? And he was like, ask me anything, y'all can ask me anything, and I'll help you as best I can. And I was like, I just started this thing called Ablackmanreading, and I would love for you to, like, you know, share it or help me get more people to look at me, right? My homeboy saying Rhyme Fest. Yeah, that's what I think it was. And I was like, because I really think that we got to get this message out, right? And he was like, I'll tell you this, you know, you might think this is the way that you should do it, but I think you should make it about service. You should just help as many people as you can and watch it grow, right? And, you know, everything that you read out there is kind of telling you that's not what you should do. You know, that you shouldn't make it about, like, you know, like everyone else, right? And that stuck with me. I was like, man, that's real. And you hear that, I hear that from people that I respect and that I see. Like, I see y'all, and you guys are like, you know, you're doing it, right? But I never hear you talk about like money or like, you know, and so if you can like do it from love, you know, you'll get so much back. And I have learned so much in doing this about like what I think I want to be ultimately, in terms of like learning about writing, what it takes to sustain the lonely process, and the type of research that is necessary. And it's beautiful because in that
Yeah.
service, right, I'm
Yeah.
getting better. You know, like there's no way I don't get better by leaping into, you know, all of you amazing people.
Thank you.
So thank you for showing up here, for always showing love, giving like giving me game and light just randomly on stuff that you see me do. Man, I appreciate you more than you know. If you were on here, you need to make sure you go get No Ashes in the Fire, and that you support everything that this brother is doing, because it is flames. It is as fly as he is all the time, right? And
Thank you. And listen, I
thank you
hope you have
enough,
a beautiful
man.
birthday, a beautiful birthday week. And you
Yeah,
said
yeah, yeah,
something, you know, who you want to
yeah,
become. No, no, no. It's who you are already right now. You're already in that. You're already in
yeah,
your path. And I just want to thank
yeah,
you. Thank you for inviting me and getting me out of my shell. As Jason, it is a lonely, lonely thing. But what makes this worth it all is community. And that's what you're building. I'm
yeah.
only able to do anything that I get to do, and it's because of the community that I'm connected with. So thank you for being part of that community as well, and thank you for having me on. And to all of you that have been hanging with us, thank you all so much. All right,
Love, love. Well, we'll talk, brother. Appreciate you.
all right, thank you so much.
Peace.
Bye, y'all.